All right. So when we look at the idea of trying to graph an inequality, if you haven't done the other video yet, then this is just a big reminder here. If you divide or multiply, today we'll do just divide by a negative, then we have to flip the inequality. It's one of the basic rules of inequalities is that when you divide by a negative or multiply by a negative, the inequalities switch. And that's the only way that it ever stays the same. All right. So what I want you to realize here is that when you look at an inequality, it looks a lot like an equation. So we can even put the lines in there like we've been doing. So I want to get x by itself. I'm going to do everything exactly the same. I'm going to look at this and say, okay, minus 12, minus 12. This goes away. I'm going to take 3x, bring it down. All right, so minus 12, both sides. I didn't touch 3x, so I bring it down. My inequality is going to stay in the middle. It's not changing. The only time it changes is when I multiply or divide by a negative. I didn't do that yet. I subtracted, but that's not multiplying or dividing. And then 28 minus 12 is going to be 16. All right. So again, I look at this and I say I want to get x by itself. What's 3 and x doing? Multiplying. So I'm going to divide by 3. Divide by 3. 3 divided by 3 cancels out. And I'm left with x greater than. I'm not switching it because I didn't divide or multiply by negative, so it stays the same. And then 16 divided by 3 is going to be 5 and 1/3. All right, that's my answer. And then all I have to do now is graph it. I'm going to put 5 and 1/3 here. All right, and I want you to graph it on your own if you've already done the video. Or after you watch the other part, we'll talk about that later on. All right, so now I'm going to go to B. All right, so same idea. I'm going to put my inequality around like an equation. I want to get x by itself. So when I look at this, I'm going to say, okay, how do I get x by itself? I always move the non-x first. So I see a minus 85. So I'm going to say plus 85 on both sides. I didn't touch this negative 9x, so I'm going to bring it down. Less than or equal to, that's going to be 107. All right. So nothing too new here. Plus 85, plus 85. 5 plus 2 is 7. 8 plus 2 is 10. All right. Now I want to get rid of that negative 9. I want to get x by itself, so I'm going to divide by negative 9. Now this is where I'm saying this is where we have to have that little stop. Notice I'm dividing by a negative. So when I divide by a negative, that goes back to this right here. If you divide or multiply by a negative, flip the inequality. So that inequality is just going to be greater than or equal to. All right, it's going from less than or equal to greater than or equal to because I'm dividing by a negative, so I'm going to flip it around. All right. I know it's one of those things, it may sound confusing at first, but it just wouldn't work unless we did that. It's just one of the rules when it comes to inequalities. So this becomes x, these cancel out, and this becomes negative. 9 goes in, let me see real quick. 9 goes into 10 once, goes in one more time, and 8/9. All right, so that right there is going to be my answer, negative 11 and 8/9. Again, we're going to graph this. Here's 0, and I want over here negative 11 and 8/9, and we're going to talk about there. And again, like I said, graph that on your own after learning to do the other parts. All right, so why don't you try C on your own for about a minute. See if you can do C on your own. Alright, let's look at this one. Alright, so I put the lines in. I want to get x by itself. So do I move the -9 or the 8 first? I always move the non-variable. So I say -8, -8. 8 minus 8 cancels out. I get -9x less than 112. Alright, 120 minus 8 is 112. Yep. So now, alright, I'm going to divide by -9. Notice again, when I divide by a negative, I have to flip that sign. So it becomes greater than, and it's going to become x greater than, I say negative. 9 goes into 11 one time. 2 left over ends up being 18 and 4/9. And that's my answer. So I sit there and say there's 0, there's -12 and 4/9, and we'll look to about graphing it later. Alright? So the big thing I want you to see from this is it's really not that different than equations. I want you to get the idea when you see something like this just to kind of get used to it. And if you remember that one rule about that flip with the inequality, then it should be all set. And then the graphing part of it. Like I said, the graphing part will be in the other video, so it should be helpful when you look at that. So let's look at the very last one for a second, just because this has been a problem with some people. All right. Remember, when I see this whole setup, I want to get rid of this parentheses. So I said before, one thing you could do is divide both sides by 8 right away at the beginning. But not everyone sees that right away, but most people are used to the distribution method. So I can say 8 times x is 8x, plus 8 times 5 is 40, less than or equal to -15. I won't switch the sign because I didn't divide or multiply by a negative, so it stays. And then I'm just going to go like normal. -40, -40. These cancel out. I get 8x less than or equal to -55. I'm going to divide by 8. Divide by 8. Notice I'm not dividing and multiplying by a negative. The 8's positive, 8's positive. Even though 55 is negative, it's what I divide by. I'm dividing by a positive, so it doesn't switch anything. And so x is going to be less than or equal to -6 7/8. Yep, so -6 7/8 is my answer. Here's 0. Here's -6 7/8. And then I'll graph it like we learned from the other video. Alright, so we'll practice with this a little bit, and hopefully this will help you. Using all that knowledge from equations will allow you to see this video. And good luck.